Welcome to the HCKORY podcast. I am Dr. Ann Verdevec with my co-hosts, Sharon Anderson Morris and Wilfred Audley. HCKORY stands for Hope, Health, and Healing in concert with ourselves and the earth. Our conversations and our interviews are meant to inspire hope, health, and healing.
Welcome back to the HCKORY podcast. I'm here, Wilfred Audley, with Sharon Anderson Morris and Ann Verdevec. And today we're going to take a little bit of a different turn. Instead of interviewing a thought leader, we were just going to chat as a podcast, as the three of us. And the main point that the reference point of this podcast is based upon a quick article that we had all read. Planets exhibit the same senses as humans and see, touch, smell, hear, and even taste. Now, this is a topic that, my mother with integrative medicine has been doing a lot of research on, and we found very interesting, especially given that one of our most recent podcasts with Khan Shlobodnikov, he talked about the connection between humans and animals, prairie dogs, domesticated dogs, and how there's a connection that goes beyond our senses and how they actually perceive the world similar to us in some sort of fashion. And now this article actually goes beyond and says that things such as plants and trees exhibit similar symptoms of experiencing the world through similar sensations as our senses. Now, I'm going to pitch it to Mom because I have a couple of thoughts on this article alone, but then I wanted to get your idea of kind of this topic and what you're learning in your research about the sensations that these plants and trees feel.
Thanks, Will. The more I read, the more I realize that humans have assumed that plants and trees are not intelligent because they sit there and they don't look like they're moving or interacting. And the initial research on this by those like Robin Wall Kimmerer and Suzanne Simard were actually criticized greatly by the scientific community. They didn't feel that, it could be true, but we're now seeing more and more research, and this article talks about all the senses that humans think of. There's an equivalent represented by some study of trees or plants. For example, when you talk about sense of touch, the Venus flytrap, which we're all familiar with, it knows when there's a certain touch and it feels it twice within a certain 20 seconds. Then it knows that may be an insect and immediately closes. So that's the sense of touch represented by the plant community. And there's many, many examples. And as we're dealing with climate change and people are talking about what to do about, our ecosystems and are they changing? And one thing I've read is that if we understand that plants can communicate and plants adapt, we're not giving them enough credit, and they will be able to adapt to climate change. Now, the big concern, of course, is that it's happening much more rapidly than other times, but there have been other times in the evolution of the earth where the climate has changed dramatically, and things have survived.
Yeah, well, in my industry, I always say the earth will survive, given human impact, and in nature will survive. It's just how much we take down with us. It's a morbid way of looking at it, but the true fight is how to connect with these inanimate, nonverbal, living things around us, that and how our relationship with that. And I think that this article kind of establishes a little bit what we've been preaching as the HCKORY podcast is our connection with it goes deeper than what we inherently are grown to believe. And for example, like these plants are more intelligent, and these trees are more intelligent than we give on or we believe. And that relationship might change if we consider them to be more intelligent beings. And I think that that's kind of one of our biggest lessons that we learned, or I learned throughout this article, and listening to you talk about it. Sharon, was there any thoughts that you
Yeah.
have? Because I have a couple of things that I would say, but I'll jump to you quickly.
Yeah, it's really interesting that when you were talking about this, I was saying Anne was such an expert about this. I love growing up with Anne. Anne has always been curious. We're 2 weeks apart in age, and I'm older. And um, she's always been fascinated by plants and animals, and I've always been fascinated with animals. And my father always made me fascinated with plants. We always had beautiful gardens that he fed, and we did science experiments about what kinds of nutrients plants need to survive, all of the nutrients that are organic that they need to become their best selves. And, Will, I was just thinking about when you were talking, we cut down trees and we can look at, the different segments of the tree to find out for our human knowledge, when was that drought? What happened, 150 years ago? And we can do that by analyzing plants. Plants give us information about what has happened in our world and in our planet.
Mhm.
We recently interviewed Khan Slobodchikov, who also is involved with plant and animal communication. And he brought up some really interesting scientific facts about plants having similar senses that as humans do. And he gave some examples which are really fascinating about how we've measured plants' ability to respond to touch, scent, um,
Smell,
sound.
feel, yeah, taste, yeah.
And I have a 26-foot cactus in our living room I named Pedro, who we have tenderly loved with all of the right food, organic food.
Mm,
And Pedro lives in a pot that's about 2 feet tall. And like I said, he's 26 feet tall. And he is as happy as can possibly be. I talk with him like every day. I play classical music for him. I play the piano for him. Um, and in addition to that, so he's really strong and sturdy, and I pay a lot of attention to him. This last year in our life at home, we've had a lot of, and my husband has had a lot of health difficulties, which he's thankfully coming out of. But all of our orchids passed away. We had a lot of orchids, they all died. There was a lot of stress in this household. We didn't water them any less. We didn't feed them any less food. We didn't play music any less. But they responded, it seems, really sensitively to the feeling of the stress in the living room.
yeah.
So I do think that those two are related.
Yeah, yeah. It just goes to show the interconnection between humans and, plant life and our environment, and
Mhm.
how, not only are we affecting them, but they are affecting us. In your example, the orchids were affected by the stressful environment, the negative energy in the air. But also when there is positive, because, I think, Mom, you've told me some research about how, interacting with nature and plant life on a daily basis actually boosts our own health. So it's kind of it's not a one-way street. It's a two-lane highway back and forth. So it's just super interesting that the effect that a constant nature and even something as simple as one plant can have we can have with each other.
Oh, totally. I mean, there's studies like people heal better when there's plants around or they can visualize plants. And one of the tenets of forest bathing or Shinrin-yoku is the being in the pine forests in Japan, and they've shown how they actually emit these chemicals that increase our natural killer cells in our bodies. So being in the pine forest has a added benefit for our ability to fight illness. And Sharon, you have a pine tree on your walk, which you have always felt was magical. And now you learn about maybe one of the reasons that attracted you to this pine tree was knowing that it's healthy for you.
Mhm. We call it the tree of magic or the wishing tree. And it is a pine tree, and there's nothing like it around. But it didn't come from anywhere. Nobody planted it. It just is by itself. And so every person that's ever come to this house, and I've interviewed a lot of people here in the city, these are technology leaders and scientists. On the way up the hike, it's a wishing tree. On the way up, I'm sorry, it's a gratitude tree. And you say thank you for whatever. And on the way back, it's a wishing tree where you make a selfless wish for something. And I've taken 4-year-olds and I've taken 80-year-olds on this hike. And I've received emails saying it came true. Yeah, it's a magical tree.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
And
love
that's
that.
yeah, something science can't explain completely. Okay, we know about the chemicals, but we can't explain it completely, yet we know there's a connection. I mean, humans grew up in nature for 300,000 more years, and we still have that nature connection.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, this is a perfect leeway to my conclusion. You know, feel free to jump in, but when I was reading this, and audience, we'll post this article. It's just brief. It just jump started the conversation.
Yeah.
But inherently, it talks about how plants actually perceive. It kind of personifies plants. It tries to impress our senses, human being senses, onto a plant. Obviously, these plants don't have the mechanisms or the body parts to actually perceive these senses, but that we it's written that way because it's trying to essentially personify plants. It demonstrate that they have sensations, but the way that we can comprehend it is through our own senses, because that's how we perceive the world. Now, this is a point that, you know, I think about a lot of times, because I think it might be a little naive to believe that the world is constructed entirely in a way that we can perceive it all through our senses. I think that there's a lot of workings of the world that are here or present with us, omnipresent, but we can't perceive through our five senses. We're limited. We're limited in that regard. So plants might be, you know, injecting into that other, you know, world being that we can't perceive. You know, it might be something entirely different, but we are not familiar with it because we are limited to our senses. Now, the one thing that I will say, and this is the closest thing that I think going beyond those senses is meditation. For a personal belief, when I've meditated, I have felt one with nature, and that's a very common with people that meditate and reach the state of nirvana, is that you feel one with nature. And my spiritual belief is that there is a flowing realm, spirit that flows through all living beings. And when you do kind of meditate and reach the state of nirvana, you kind of inject yourself into that for a little bit. You can actually perceive it and you can sense it. You're not fully in that realm, but you can sense a little bit of it. And that's, you know, believe what you might want to believe, but that's where I have reached that kind of sensation where, okay, the world is a lot bigger than I can perceive through my five senses. And that might be, you know, any other living being, plants, trees, any foliage might be able to perceive the world in a different way. And I think that it's all interconnected in some form. We just can't perceive it. And so I think that this article is good, and just thinking that thought, but it really personifies plants to try to kind of let people understand that they're intelligent, but really it goes beyond our senses. They have their own kind of ability to feel, sense, touch, taste, and hear. So that's at least my thoughts on the article. But you know, we will add all the research. We will add the article to the details if you guys want to check it out. But any last comments from anybody else? But I really
Yeah.
enjoyed talking about it.
There's one last thing I wanted to mention is that in one of our podcasts with Larry Smarr, uber scientist Larry Smarr, who I took on this hike past the Tree of Magic. Um, which is always fascinating with me. My question when I go on this hike past the Tree of Magic is always to these people, and many of them are scientists, is what do you think happens after you die? And after we do our wish and our gratitude with that Tree of Magic, or the wishing tree, I've heard probably 150 people's different opinions on after touching this tree, on what they think happens after people die. Fascinating. Larry, listen to his podcast with us. Larry also talked about he has 150 orchids. Is that right, you guys? In his house. And he talks to every one of them every day. Every day, talks to every orchid. And for a scientist to admit that he talks to his orchids individually every day and he knows them as individuals says a lot, gives a lot of credibility in my mind to the fact that plants are beings and we're all connected.
Absolutely. That's a great way to finish it. I love it. Mom, any last thoughts?
Oh, I'm going to go back to science real quick because I think we're stuck a bit in Darwinian's, natural selection, the strongest survive. And what we're learning more is this living system model that in a healthy forest, trees don't compete, they cooperate to help each other get sun. And they've done this by studies of how they move their leaves and adjust to what happens. And likewise, we're learning about our own bodies and how we are each living systems with, the bacteria cooperating in our gut to help digest food. And so we are learning so much by looking at things in a different way. And I think some of our conversation today is that we talk about, oh, come on, plants don't communicate with us, but looking at it a different way, I think we learn more and can get back to the science of it.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Well, thank you guys for listening. We hope to do something similar like this here and there in between our interviews. We enjoy talking about this, and we hope you guys enjoy listening to us. Thank you and have a good one.